Hi, I'm Lydia Gillman, and welcome to the Stepping into Purpose podcast. This season, we're diving into the inner blocks that hold us back from fully stepping into our purpose. Things like self-sabotage, imposter syndrome, and limiting beliefs. Each week, we'll explore practical tools like nervous system regulation, rewiring neural pathways, and healing past trauma to help you overcome these patterns. You'll hear from inspiring guests, sharing their personal journeys of growth and transformation. If you've been feeling stuck or held back by doubt and fear, this show is here to remind you that stepping into your purpose isn't only possible, it's your destiny. Join me every Thursday for new episodes packed with insights, encouragement, and the tools you need to help you live your most aligned life. Subscribe now, and together, let's step into our purpose. Welcome back to the Stepping into Purpose podcast. I'm your host, Lydia Gillman, and today we're diving into a topic that is near and dear to my heart: energy management for high achievers. My guest is Avery Thatcher, an amazing coach who calls herself a chaos management specialist, and I absolutely love that. She works with highly sensitive high achievers and talks about her journey as an ER nurse to suffering a major burnout, which led her to this work, which is really helping people create calm in their life and manage their energy. If you've ever felt like no matter how much you accomplish, you're still running on empty, then this episode is for you. The truth is, success isn't about doing more. It's about managing your energy in a way that actually supports you. So if you're ready to shift from exhaustion to empowerment, let's get started. Here's Avery. Hi, Avery. Welcome to the Step Into Purpose podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I am so excited for this.
Yay. It's been a long time in the making. We've connected a few times, and it feels like there's no better time than right now. I think everything happens in its own timing, and it's wonderful to have you here. So you're someone who I've just gotten to know recently, but who really seems to be living your purpose. Tell us a little bit about where you are now, and then we'll talk a bit about how you got there.
Yes, absolutely. So I call myself the chaos management specialist because I really feel like it's not so much about stopping chaos, because chaos is inevitable in our lives, really. And in this world, it's kind of a wild dumpster fire right now. So we have to accept that chaos is there, but although chaos is inevitable, feeling out of control isn't. And so this is where we're looking, how do we navigate these scenarios? And a lot of it comes down to nervous system regulation. And that is something which I'm just so fascinated by and such a nerd about. And it really ties into what I used to do before I did this.
That's amazing. I love that. Yeah, chaos. I've been learning a lot about that lately too. Life is going to happen. It's not about stopping things. We can never stop things, but it's about how you react or respond to things, and just how quickly you can come back to center. That's really my goal these days. Something crazy might happen, and it's like, how quickly can I come back to myself rather than spinning out of control from something which is out of your control anyway.
Absolutely. And I think that's a part that so many of us really struggle with, especially if you have like anxiety or OCD, like I do, and like you've shared. And
Yes,
it
me
just,
too.
yeah, like it's so hard to be able to go with the flow when every ounce of your body and your brain is just like, oh, but it's so bad. No, it's okay. No, 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 hold on to everything. So I think learning really just how we're wired helps kind of step back from some of that, because then we can recognize like, oh, okay, so that's a reactive wiring. I'm going to choose a different program and we're going to run this instead. And I think that's such a empowered place to be navigating all this chaos from.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's an empowerment, isn't it? Because, yeah, I'm the same. I've managed high functioning anxiety and OCD for the majority of my life, and I didn't really realize that that's not what everyone felt, So I am managing all that pretty well now, and it's really my focus to help others. And while I've been a yogi since I was a teenager with meditation and physical yoga and things, that really is amazing at regulating your nervous system. But I didn't really know that, and there wasn't much knowledge. Really, the whole information about nervous system regulation has been relatively recent, I feel. Or it's come into my world reasonably recently. So, really, the last few years, that's been a big deep dive for me. And I realized I was doing a lot of it, but unconsciously. So that did help, but I didn't make the connection.
Yes, absolutely. So often our body and our brains can sort of guide us towards what we actually need. And it's often when we resist that that we start to run into some troubles. But yes, absolutely. The interesting thing, though, is that yoga as a nervous system regulation tool, when you look back to the ancient Vedic texts that the yoga practices are pulled from and designed from, and then just looking into the history of yoga and where yoga asana as we know it today, where that sort of started from and everything. And then you also look at how it was westernized to a degree. So much of that teaching, the ancient teaching that was all focused around nervous system regulation and knowing yourself, was completely removed from it. So it just
Yeah.
became this workout. So, or
Yes.
the stretch,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
maybe in a hot environment now. So
Yes.
all of the actual root of what yoga, the whole eight limbs of it are meant to teach us, just was removed. And now we're starting to get back into that and be like, oh, so they actually knew something that was really helpful. And I think this is such an important piece of this because so often we look to solve the problem with the same mindset that created it or is
Yes.
perpetuating it. And when we look back to a time where the world was a little bit calmer and we didn't feel this disconnect from ourselves to the degree that we often do now, there's so much learning from that. And there's so much more that we can pull from that that we can apply today rather than trying to figure out in our westernized, capitalized brain, how do I fix capitalism's impact on me? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And it's interesting, actually. Like, I got into yoga. And when I speak of yoga, the same as you, it's all the different parts of it. And that's one tiny part is hatha yoga, which is the physical yoga, which, in the Western world, it's like, no, that's yoga, the physical thing. And I didn't really do the physical part of it for a long time, but more focused on the knowing myself, the meditation side, all that sort of thing. And it was way before it was cool, or hip
Yeah.
and westernized. And so I kept it to a lot of it to myself because people would think you're weird and things, and I was younger then, of course. Now I wouldn't care, but I was like teenager, young adult. But then it was interesting to see it become so much in vogue. And it was interesting to me, and I'm like, people really just treating it like a workout, but I think it did still help. But then you're only getting such a tiny piece of it, aren't you? So I'm so
Mm.
glad so many more people are coming back to the full knowledge of yoga as it's meant to be.
I agree. I agree. It's just so
Yeah.
much more rich and so
Yeah.
much more impactful. So
Yeah.
yes, I'm glad. I'm glad we're
Yeah.
talking about it.
Yeah, it makes a big difference. So tell us how you found your way to your
Yeah,
business.
chaos management specialist. Yeah, that's what I call myself because it's just how things seem to fly. So, yeah, absolutely. So, I started off my career as a registered nurse working in intensive care units across Canada. And I noticed really early on that the number one reason why adults found themselves in the ICU were because of illnesses and diseases that could be linked to chronic stress. So I decided to get out of the reactive side of medicine in 2015, started building a business around teaching yoga and meditation and mindfulness and all of the things. And then at the end of 2018, I realized that I was missing a very important piece of this puzzle because I myself burnt out in a very epic way that's left me with multiple chronic illnesses and a disability. And I'm no longer able to be an ICU nurse. And I used to think that that was my purpose. And
Mm.
so there was so much understanding of what my identity actually is and who I am and what my work is and what the purpose that I really want to connect to is. And along that journey, I realized that there are a huge gap that we need to start addressing when it comes to stress management, because really burnout is more an energy management issue than a stress management issue, but it's often not talked about in that way. And so I think bringing more of that information forward can help other people navigate that chaos a little bit differently than what I did, because I thought I was doing everything right, quote unquote, but still my body gave out on me. So yeah, I think that's sort of how I found this. Now, as for my purpose, it did take a little while for me to accept that this is the deeper purpose for me, because I think so much of me wanted to control my purpose and I wanted to be that ICU nurse. And it came from a lot of learning how to let go of the expectation and dig down to what was the actual root of what I was doing. And I realized it actually just came down to navigating chaos, whether it was in an ICU bed or in different areas of our lives.
That's amazing, isn't it? It's so interesting how life shows us, in its own way. And first of all, it's amazing that you loved that nursing and you were making such a difference. And it was a more obvious difference, wasn't it? Because people were dying and you're helping to stop them dying. I know someone here in New Zealand actually who's got a business called Heart Place Hospital. It's like a charity actually as well, and it really works with people on the front line in medical professions and things to really nurture them and stop that burnout because it's huge, unfortunately.
Mhm.
And I think it's so interesting how then you got led to what you're doing and that you were doing it anyway. But it's like you had to get that message so you could really, you can really help others and share it with them. And I think this is the quiet killer, the people who've had the car accidents and things that's more obvious. But I think so many of us are just from this hustle culture and just the 24/7 online all the time,
Mhm.
the stress and just the way it is killing people. I mean, stress does kill in a quiet way, doesn't it? It creates disease and just the constant bathing and stress hormones, cortisol and things really does lead to very serious disease.
Absolutely. And if you
Yeah.
look back, actually, the World Health Organization, I think it might have been 2014, it might have been a little bit earlier now. I can't quite remember the year, but they declared stress an epidemic across the world because it's estimated between 70 to 90% of doctors' visits are actually related to stress and the impact of stress that it's having on your life. And then when we look at all the different illnesses that really manifest themselves, there's so many links back to how you're navigating the stress that you're experiencing. Because the truth is, all kinds of things about life are good, stressful, struggle, stressful. Sometimes now, with all that's happening, the moral distress is really starting to level
Yeah.
on us. But really, it's how we navigate that that really changes things.
Yeah, that's amazing. And that sounds like it was all pre-COVID. And then, with the pandemic, I really had hope that the world would change in a way and things would slow down a bit. And there was so much potential there for that to happen, I think. Like the wildlife started coming back because all the noisy machines and boats and things were gone. But yeah, it's almost like people have come back at it harder than ever, you know.
Yes, absolutely. Like when I speak to corporations, we're really experiencing a lot of making up for lost time,
Yeah.
even this far out of the pandemic experience and what so many countries experienced in lockdowns. And Indeed.com, which is like your Seek
Oh,
in
yes.
New Zealand. Yeah,
Yes.
so it's a job board kind of thing. And so they did a survey back in 2019 asking people, are you feeling burnt out? And they gave like criteria for it and things. And it was about 9 to 11% of people were experiencing burnout at that time.
Mm.
And then they did the test again. They surveyed another 150,000 applicants. And they did that again in 2022 and 2023. And now it's 68 to 75% of people are experiencing burnout.
Wow.
And it's really just this huge spike. And there's a number of different reasons for why that spike could be happening, but a lot of it does really seem to be tied to, making up for that lost time
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
proving ourselves in this world as it's evolving.
And I think also the downward financial turn, we really are in a recession here, I think, in New Zealand. I don't know if
Oh,
we're
for sure.
using those words so much, but a
No, they're
lot of
avoiding that for some reason. I don't know why.
I
Call it
know.
what it is.
It really is. And a lot of people are
Hmm.
struggling. And I think that leads to stress and people taking on extra jobs. But it's really just a pressure cooker, isn't it? And what's going
Hmm.
to give eventually, people's health
Yeah.
is what gives. So, yeah, this work
Hmm.
is more important than ever. And
Hmm.
yeah, it's amazing that you're working with corporations really to open their eyes as well. And that's really where it's needed to be managed and to just change the culture, the work culture, I think would make a huge difference.
Very much so. Because I think a lot of this conversation focuses on the individual. You need to manage your stress better. You need to have boundaries. You need to do all these things. But it's like, okay, but if you're working in a broken system that
Yeah,
is pushing you to and
yeah,
has this expectation of you to
yeah,
do these different levels of work and at the pace that you are. And then when we look at how AI is changing the workflow and how now AI can start to take on some of the things, it's like when they bought in assembly lines.
yes.
So when we start to look at how we're multitasking and taking on more things because now we've got technology to assist us in new ways, it just really brings things back to the word priority.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because when we look at the word priority, prior to the Industrial Revolution, it was just priority. You couldn't pluralize that. It got pluralized after when assembly lines and things started to come in, because then you could
Wow.
have multiple things. And so it's now, if we could pluralize priorities even more, that's kind of how life is going, because you need
Yes.
to have those things. But when you look at the actual Latin root of the word priority, it means first thing, only
Wow.
first thing.
Wow.
So you can only have one first.
That's so
So
good to realize that, isn't it? Yeah, because priorities, what are your priorities? I never really hear it in the singular these days. It's like
no.
more, more, more. And I mean, it really leads to overwhelm. I mean,
Hmm.
and this is a problem. And people don't realize that they're sort of being set up a lot of the time, that it is the broken system which needs to change. And recently I was doing some, I can't even think of the word, keyword research. That's right. I was doing some
Oh, yes.
keyword research, yes, around anxiety and things. And just so many searches were, what's the best job for someone with anxiety, or what's the best job for a highly sensitive person? And I do see myself as a highly sensitive person as well.
Me
And
too.
yeah, and I think it does go together a lot. I've suffered burnout as well and chronic fatigue syndrome. And it's like for people like us, the system doesn't work. And there's so few, creating our own businesses really is the only way. But for some people, they might not have that in them, even though they want to make a difference. But maybe starting a business isn't the right way. You do have to have certain skills. So it's really tricky.
Yeah.
I know that companies are trying to address this with wellness programs and things, but sometimes it feels token, we'll give you
Oh,
counselors and this sort of thing. It's like, well, that's all very
yeah.
nice, but can you just change the system, the expectations you have on us?
Absolutely. And I think a lot of that is they don't even realize the expectations that they're having.
Yeah,
So a
yeah,
lot of times when I go into an organization, I'll say like, sure, I'll talk to your frontline staff about burnout, but I also want to talk to your leaders
yeah,
because the leaders are also help driving the policies that are burning everybody out. So really just getting everybody all on the same page is really important for
yeah,
that because yes, absolutely. You can be as good as possible for managing all of your own stress and boundaries and everything. But if you're in that system that's designed to burn you out
yeah.
and you don't know all of the rules, which is part of the problem, is we're not actually taught all of the rules of the game. So then we're operating with just partial understanding of how we can actually navigate this.
Yeah, it's so interesting. And it's a particular problem here in New Zealand anyway. The government has really is really trying to cut down costs in the health sector. And we have a great public health system here, thank goodness. But the health workers are really suffering because, so many people are being fired and let go just to cut costs. And so that puts
Hmm.
so much pressure on the ones who are remaining. And, if
Hmm.
someone will leave, they won't be replaced usually. And it's like a pressure cooker. It's just waiting for something to give.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
The health system is where it's needed most. And yeah, it's just so ironic. So, what would you say? What are some of your best, as someone sort of like me who's experienced high functioning anxiety and OCD as well? What are some of your best tools which you use for regulating your nervous system and keeping well and whole?
Yeah, so a lot of it comes down to really managing my energy well.
Yeah.
And this is especially true because of the multiple chronic illnesses and disability that I have. But even if you are a healthy
Mhm.
person, this is such an important piece of the puzzle because, again, if you want to do all of these stress management things to help kind of deal with the anxiety and everything else you've got going on, you have to want to,
Yeah.
number one,
Yeah.
and you have to have the energy for it, number two.
Mhm.
So I often explain this in an analogy. So if you imagine that you're sitting in a boat and the boat is full of holes, but it's okay because you've got a bucket and a life jacket. And so as the water's pouring in, you're just using that bucket and you're slowly bailing yourself out. Everything's great. You're just going for a little while and then you start to get tired and then it's harder to bail that bucket out. And then you start to sink to the point that your life jacket catches you. And so your life jacket is burnout. It's our body's fail-safe mechanism, keeps us from failure. And then the bucket are all of those stress management techniques, but you have to have the energy to bail them out, to use those. And so this is where one of the most important things that we need to do is become aware of all of the holes in our boat, the holes in our boat that we can do something about, and the ones that we can't. And the ones that we can't are the ones that we need to pay a lot of attention to because we need to figure out how to make sure that we balance the amount of flow coming in from those areas and also make sure that we're the things that we can control, that we're balancing that with the things that we can't control. So we're making sure that we're understanding the amount of chaos flowing into our life and then understanding how we want to respond to that chaos because our stress response is a default to chaotic situations, but we can choose another response. We can choose another program for our body to run. And so this is where what you've been talking about on the season with all of the nervous system regulation is such an important piece because we need to understand how it's wired first so that way we can know where to interrupt the program and choose a different option.
Oh, I love that. What a great analogy. And yeah, let's fix the boat rather than having to keep bailing out.
Right? Yes,
Yeah,
let's address the actual problem rather than just trying to manage. Yes,
makes so
exactly.
much sense. So for me, I have a daily routine and it takes maybe less than an hour in the morning where I'll just do a little bit of yoga. I'll meditate for a little while and then do a bit of writing, journaling and things. And that seems to set me up pretty well as well as like walking the dog or something, which is a basic exercise that really helps. But what would be some tools you'd suggest to people which are sort of easy and manageable to fit into your daily life, but really do help?
Yeah, so the first thing which I would recommend you do in the morning is ask, what's my energy like today?
Yeah.
Like, am I high? Am I normal? Am I low on energy? And then making sure that you set up expectations for yourself for that day that match that energy level. So if you're really low on mental energy, maybe don't try and solve some complex problem, or like me, don't try and fix some coding on my website that I'm not really comfortable with. Pick something a little bit easier to do
Yeah.
because then I'm working with the energy that I have.
Yes.
And then the other thing that I would recommend is to look for pockets of time
Mhm.
rather than, the hour-long
Yeah.
to-do list in the morning or the half an hour of self-care. Really, we want to, like, I really wish I could meet whoever said you need a half hour a day of self-care, and I want to shake
Yeah.
them
Yeah.
because, like, who has
Hard.
time for that
Yeah. Yeah.
regularly? Like, really.
Yeah.
So, slowing down and just being like, where are my pockets of time? So, 30 seconds before I go into the grocery store, can I take a couple of deep breaths? Or can I just sit and not do anything?
Yeah.
Before I go back to work, if I've taken a little bathroom break or something, I sit there and I do a little bit of somatic shaking just to like
Yeah. Yeah.
release some of the energy from my body. So it's not so much about having these super rigid, beautiful ritualic practices. It's about how do I find these little pockets of time
Yeah.
to do
Yeah.
something for me in.
Yeah, I love that. And I notice it with my husband actually when he'll come home from work and he'll sit in the car for a little while and just transition, I guess, into this different,
Yeah.
here I am, I'm home from work. I just need to have these few minutes just to make that transition. And I think same with meditation. I mean, when I say I have that schedule, but I often break it up. So I'll do the 15 minutes of meditation or yoga or something, and it will get broken up around different things and managing my kids or whatever it is. But yeah, I think that is so key because unless you get up, and I do often have the intention to get up at like 6 o'clock in the morning and do all that first, but that's exhausting as well. And I do find exactly like you say, I'm tired, and it really does affect the rest of my energy for the rest of the day. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
perfect what you're saying. Yeah,
I would also recommend for someone that's like me, that's like type A and
yeah,
high functioning anxiety, you love a good list and you love it when someone says, this is going to make your morning better. And you're like, great. And then you're trying to do it and it's hard to do and you can't get it consistently. And then now, not only are you not doing that thing, now you're shaming yourself for not being able to do that thing. When we look at our different routines throughout the day, focus on how you want to feel, not what you want to
yes,
do because then you're so much more adaptable. So again, in the morning, I know I need to feel grounded and clear on what my expectations are for myself for the day and what is just on for the day. And so part of my morning routine before I get out of bed actually involves checking my phone. And I go through the process of sorting out my day because then I'm able to actually sit down and maybe have a mindful cup of tea or meditate for a little bit. But if I haven't had a chance to do that first, I don't feel that grounded clarity.
yeah,
Even my yoga practice is a mess. I'm just like, oh, I'm in downward dog, but I'm also like 3 hours ahead in the meeting that might be coming up that I can't
yeah.
remember if I have. So, yeah, I think focus on how you want to feel and just be gentle with yourself while you figure out what that looks like for each day.
I love that. That's such an important thing which we often miss because yeah, it's getting our brains on board like okay, just like we would portion things out, like maybe portioning out a meal or something for how many people in the family. It's like we need to do that with our day and go, okay, I need to not expend too much energy in the morning because I have this big thing in the afternoon and yeah,
Hmm.
really managing it like that. And I'm so glad, that you got led into this direction because I know what you were doing as the ER nurse was so important to saving lives, but I really feel like this is where you're meant to be because the alarm system's going on, but people aren't seeing it. This is really the
Hmm.
critical place people need to focus on. And in
Hmm.
my early to mid 20s, I got chronic fatigue syndrome. And I
Hmm.
really see that that was a result of just pushing myself with the high functioning anxiety and just not listening to my body for so long and not really paying attention to my nervous system. I wouldn't have even really known what that was, back then.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, and your body tells you suddenly, bang, it stops, and I had no
Hmm.
energy. And it was so frustrating as I think I was about 24 at the time. When you think you're at the height of your energy and life and just not having energy to do anything, not to go out with friends or
Hmm.
anything. I'd do a gentle walk, each day. And really, it was like becoming a baby again in a way, really just having to nurture and build myself up again. And I think for
Hmm.
me, it was sort of emotional as well as physical, it was sort of a build up of trauma and all sorts of things. And it was really like reparenting at that stage.
Hmm.
It's very interesting.
I agree.
Yeah, your body is so wise and it does tell you. And even when you're talking about, the somatic shaking, I mean, so many of these things come naturally. Like when I was much younger and if I couldn't sleep or something and I'd just feel itchy and I guess I was just dysregulated or something and I'd get up and I'd start shaking out my legs and my body just to soothe. I mean, so much of this is intuitive, isn't it? We're so wise in so many ways, and it's if we just come back to that, it really makes such a difference.
Absolutely. And it's really tricky, I think, because intuition is often looped in with this like new agey kind of mentality. And as the hyper logical, pragmatic person that I am, I really struggled to connect with that.
Yeah, yeah.
And I remember there's so much research into nurses' intuition and things,
Hmm,
but there's
hmm.
this one story about this fire chief that he was standing outside the building and he was just kind of like observing, and everybody was in the building. He kind of went through a little walk and he's just like, everybody out right now. And as soon as he got everybody out, within 10 seconds, the building collapsed. And it
Wow.
would have killed everybody, all the firefighters that were in there if he had
Wow.
not gotten everybody out. But all of their monitoring equipment, everything said everything was fine. So there was a review board and they were just like, how did you know? Like,
Mm,
what was it? And he's just like, I don't know, I just had this feeling. And
mm,
so when we look at intuition from the super pragmatic logical side, what it
mhm,
actually is your ability to scan the 80,000 bits of information every second, and you're pulling out the right pieces that you
mhm.
need. So your body and your brain are able to scan all of that and be like, this is vital. Pay attention to this. Because what they discovered on that review was that the fire chief noticed that the entire building had gone quiet,
Wow.
completely quiet. So the fire had run out of oxygen. So it was
Wow.
going to then implode on itself.
Right,
So
right.
it was that little tiny bit of information that his brain hung on to, that
Yeah.
his intuition then told him, get everybody out. So if you're
Mhm.
also a very logical person like me, and the idea of like trusting your body's wisdom and listening to the universe is just like, that sounds fake. There's actually a lot of science behind how we can do that and how we can view that in a non-woo-woo, new agey kind of way. And I think
I
that's just really important to look at. And then also with yoga, so much of it is getting looped into that kind of woo-woo, new agey side. But there's actually a path called Yin Yoga that is fully intellectual. It does not do any spiritual side of it, and it is authentic and goes right back to the roots of the practice, but it comes from that very focused, logical perspective. And so it's really what I resonate with as well.
I love that. And the thing is, they're finding more and more, it's all the same, the science backs up now, has caught up with what the ancient sages said so many years ago. It's all the same, but it's come at it in different ways. But just go back
Mm-hmm.
to the intuition. It's interesting, and I had quite a struggle with it as well, especially with having OCD, because your brain's telling, oh, do this. It's that control thing, and then you go, oh, do I have to go this way, or is it an intuition? Will something bad happen if I go that way? I really did
Yes.
struggle
Yep.
because it's like, okay, is this my brain just trying to have a joke with me, or is this a real
Totally.
thing? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Anxiety, generalized anxiety disorder, OCD, all of those things.
Yeah.
Even a little bit of PTSD and CPTSD
Yes.
can sneak in. And so when people are like, listen to your inner voice, it's like, my inner voice is broken.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
maybe I shouldn't listen,
Yeah.
or like
Yes.
listen with a filter,
Yeah.
right? And that's
Yeah.
where I think learning how to distance yourself from those things and become back into that observing space is so important.
Yeah. That's so helpful. Yeah. It's such an important thing to see where you're at and to go with it, because the masses will be telling you one thing, but we have to really know who we are and how we experience things or whatever. Yeah, it's so important. I'm so glad that someone like you is out there and representing all of us, and I think there are so many people like us out there, but so many may not really realize. They just think there's something wrong with them. And that was me for a long time as well. You just say, why can't I cope like normal people?
Mhm.
Why do I have this?
Totally.
So,
But the
yeah,
real secret I think that we all learn is that no one's coping.
that's
Like
right. That
no
is
one is
true.
actually, it's just that facade that we put up,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially with the high functioning thing. It's just wanting people to
Hmm.
think I'm okay, having that mask. So yeah, I've got a teenager and a tween, and to
Hmm.
be brought up in this. I mean, even school. I mean, I struggled with school, just having that
Hmm.
6 hours of, 6 hours plus really of being in an institution, learning all day and with a whole class of people who you may not really choose to spend time with if you have the choice. It's not easy, for 5 days a week. And actually my daughter today, we've just gone back after the summer and she's had a few weeks, but today she's exhausted. And 7 o'clock I woke her up and she just couldn't cope really. And I'm like, well, that's
Hmm.
fine, I understand that. So she's just having a bit of a quiet day today, and then tomorrow she'll go
Nice.
back. But yeah,
Nice.
we have to see this, especially in our kids as well, and normalize that actually it's okay if you need to take a rest day.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
So tell people, first of all, the work which you do and what you offer to people who might want to work with you. and where they can find you as well, because yeah, it's so important.
The things that I do right now is I really focus on working with high achievers, especially highly sensitive high achievers, because I think there's so much more of a drive that leads into burnout and us maybe not coping as well as we hoped with all of the chaos that we take on and that is in our life. So that's really where I focus. And I do have an app that gives you daily practices that you can do. So you don't have to think about it. You just open it up and it's got your 15-minute yoga class, your guided meditation, all of the things on a nice little list.
Wow.
Um, and then, yeah, I just feel like having that mental load taken off
Yes.
just makes it so much more accessible to do. And then again, it's looking for those little pockets of time, not a big 90-minute yoga class or something.
Yes.
Yeah,
It's decision
absolutely.
fatigue I find really difficult. So yeah, that's amazing that you've created an app which takes away all that.
Yes, exactly. Because I've been a part of different yoga apps where you open it up and there's like thousands of classes, and I'm like,
Yes.
I don't know what to do. So then I close it and I don't use it. So this hopefully will navigate that for some people that struggle with that as well.
Fantastic. And we'll link that in the show notes. And where else can people find you? Do you have a website?
Yes, so our new website just launched. So it's called optimizedchaosmethod.com. And there's all kinds of free resources on there, including quizzes to help you discover your self-sabotage style. There's resources to help you navigate burnout. Yeah, just so much on there that you can go have a look at. And I write so many articles that are really from the heart. So you can see how I navigate things like this in real life.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, you are such a gift. I'm so glad that life led you to where you are now and so that you can help so many people, you know. I think having this platform where you're reaching people all around the world, we're on opposite sides of the world right now,
Mhm.
and you know that's going to have such a further reach than your original purpose, which was helping critically sick people, but one person at a time. So now you can really make a difference in that way. So thank you for all that you do, and it's always such a pleasure to connect with you.
Well, and thank you for having this space for us to come on and chat and connect. And
Yeah.
I just think it's so important. So thank you.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Wasn't that so good? Avery and her work is so amazing, and I'm so grateful to her for all that she's putting out in the world. Here are the main takeaways. Number one, self-care in small pockets of time. It's not about rigid, lengthy rituals, but about finding small moments for self-care, like deep breaths before getting out of the car and into your house, or somatic shaking during a bathroom break. Number two, morning routines should be flexible. Instead of forcing a strict routine, focus on how you want to feel and adapt your practices to fit your day. Number two, morning routines should be flexible. Instead of forcing a strict routine, focus on how you want to feel and adapt your practices to fit your day. Number three, avoiding self-shame and high-functioning anxiety. Type A personalities often struggle with setting high expectations and then feeling guilty when they can't meet them. A gentler, more flexible approach is key. Number four, energy management throughout the day. Just like portioning food, it's important to portion energy throughout the day, ensuring there's enough left for important moments rather than burning out early. Number five, chronic fatigue and ignoring the body's signals. I shared my experience with chronic fatigue syndrome in my 20s, and I really emphasized how ignoring stress and anxiety led me to a complete physical breakdown. Number six, intuition is science backed. Intuition isn't just a woo-woo concept. It's the brain scanning massive amounts of data and picking up on vital cues. Learning to trust the body's wisdom is a powerful tool. Number seven, struggles with anxiety and OCD. Distinguishing between intuition and anxious thoughts can be challenging, especially for those with OCD or generalized anxiety. Learning to observe thoughts without attaching to them is crucial. Number 8, supporting highly sensitive kids. High sensitivity can make traditional school environments exhausting. Recognizing when a child needs rest instead of pushing through is super important for their well-being. Number 9, Avery's work and resources. Avery specializes in helping high-achieving, highly sensitive individuals avoid burnout. She offers an app with guided daily practices, yoga, and meditation, removing the burden of decision fatigue, which some of those larger apps can really present. And number 10, the bigger impact of nervous system regulation. While Avery started as an ER nurse, she now helps people on a larger scale by addressing the root causes of burnout and high-functioning anxiety before they lead to severe health consequences. I hope you enjoyed this episode and really got something out of it. If you can think of someone else who'll benefit, please share the link with them and consider subscribing to the podcast so you don't miss any episodes. If you think you might have high-functioning anxiety, then check out my free guide, 10 Hidden Signs of High-Functioning Anxiety and What to Do About Them. And I'll link that in the show notes below. Thanks again for joining me, and I'll see you next week.